Good day, everyone. We'll be discussing the life and works of Rizal, the Rizal'S Annotation of Morga. That'll be based on the pre-colonial Philippines.
So Rizal was in the United States before he lived in London for months. From the US, he boarded the SS City of Rome, a UK ocean liner, to get to Liverpool, England. Rizal arrived at Liverpool on May 24, 1888, where he stayed at Dr. Antonio Redor's home. So by the end of the month, Rizal boarded the train to get to London, England, and arrived at May 25, 1888, and found the Beckett's family private home at 37 Chalcot Crescent, Primrose Hill, Camden Town, Greater London, where he stayed several months, mastering and improving his English language. For staying several months at the Beckett's private family home, Rizal had an affair with the oldest Beckett daughter, Gertrudis, where Rizal called her Getty and Gertrudis called her Petty.
So why are Rizal interested in studying the pre-colonial history of the Philippines? Well, basically, Rizal believed that the Philippines already had an established community, way of life, and society, and was not as backwards and inferior as the Spaniards came.
And out of all the books that he saw, he chose to annotate the work of Morga. He got interested in Morga's work because he heard or learned from it from his uncle Jose Alberto. Rizal found inaccurate information on Morga's work, so he decided to annotate from it.
Now, in London, through a letter of introduction from Rizal'S, the director of the Indian Office Library, he stumbled upon Rizal. Now, Rizal was to him an impressive character with his learning and knowledge through his youth. Now, Reinhold Ross is a librarian of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and an authority on Malayan customs and languages. He was the one who called Rizal a pearl of a man, as he was impressed by his learning and character. Connection with the British authorities from Reinhold Ross brought Rizal to the British Museum, since he gave Rizal a reader's pass that made him see the Antonio de Morga Sexos de las Filipinas. Antonio de Morga is the author of the Successos de las Filipinas. Now, there are at least chapters 1 to 8. It is presented in the PowerPoint. Now, let's hear about the background of Antonio de Morga. Antonio de Morga is a Spanish conquistador, a government official, and a historical anthropologist that made him become an observer through various islands, including the Philippines. And he is also a doctorate in canon and civil law. He has been recognized as a first-hand account of the early Spanish colonial culture venture into Asia. Morga's work is based on personal experiences or on documentation from eyewitnesses of the events described. Thus, the Successos is the work of an honest observer, himself a major actor in the drama of his time, a versatile bureaucrat who knew the workings of the administration from the inside. It is also the first history of the Spanish in the Philippines to be written by a layman, as opposed to a religious chronicler. Morga's book was praised, quoted, and plagiarized by contemporaries and successors, and it has been annotated by Rizal. Now, let's not talk about Antonio de Morga. Let's talk about his novel, the Successos de las Filipinas. Now, it presented his documentation of the deeds achieved by the Spaniards, the discovery, conquest, and conversion of the Filipino islands. Not only the deeds, but it was also their practices, policies, and fortunes as time passes with the Spaniards. An example in the novel of Successos de las Filipinas, it's based from the island of Cebu. It was where the Spaniards' conquest began and continued in all the various islands. In Visayas, they are called the tattooed ones, based from Morga. The reason is that the most important male residents here have, since their childhood, decorated their entire body with paint. And that paint was black powder that would cover the blood oozing from their skin. In Cebu, there are also islands of Luzon and Cagayan. Now in Luzon, Morga talked about the length of its trip ahead from its couple channel, the temperature of the island, which is mostly from various regions and provinces thereof, and the head and beginning of the island in the channel. The beaches are warm, and in the interior, where the city of Manila is situated, it is also mild. But based from Rizal, he annotated it to where like the rainy seasons from Morga were, the winter seasons of Morga were rainy, and the rest of the year were summer. Other than Rizal, there's also Cagayan. Now in Cagayan, there are various natives. Natives that have the same complexion on the island, more physically able, warlike, and brave than the others. Their hair is long and hangs down on their shoulders. They had risen up and rebelled 2 times against Spaniards after they had first been classified. There was considerable effort made to defeat and pacify them again, to defeat the Spaniards. But afterwards, the Spaniards took over and they rearranged their appearances, like they dressed them up. Now the dress in the advent of the Spaniards were like, for men, clothes of Canyan fabric, without collars sewn in front, with short sleeves extending down to beyond the waist, some blue and some black. And that's some of the examples of men.
So Rizal's dedication to annotate Morga's work was promised a publication by Dr. Antonio Maria Regidor, a wealthy Filipino exiled in London following the events of the Cavite Mutiny in 1872. Regidor committed to equally divide the profits between him and Rizal as soon as his investments were recovered. But eventually, Regidor unexpectedly backed out of the deal on helping Rizal out without an explanation. One of Rizal's friends hinted at racism, as Regidor was of Spanish extraction.
The First Voyage Around the World is written by Antonio Pigafetta, a famous Italian traveler. This book is all about their expedition with Ferdinand Magellan around the world to find spices. It was more on religious chronicles, which is also contains Christianism achievements, knowing that they also made the history in the Philippines. What are those? In this book, it is also indicated that Magellan brought a cross with nails and cross, which was called Magellan's Cross, which he told the kings of Zuluan and Calagan that it should be placed at the summit of the highest mountain in order for them to adore it. By doing so, neither thunder, lightning, nor storms would hurt them. It was also said that Magellan spoke to the king through interpreter, which encouraging the king to be a good Christian by burning all the idols in his country and begin to worship his cross. After many weeks in the Philippines, Magellan had converted as many as 2,200 locals to Christianity, including Raha Humabon, the Raha of Cebu, which later named Don Carlos, and the most leaders of the islands around Cebu. However, the king of Mactan, Lapu-Lapu, refused to convert into Christianity. With this, Magellan brought 49 troops, including him, against 1,500 troops of Lapu-Lapu, wherein Magellan was killed in the Battle of Mactan, which is another history of the Philippines. But this book was not about the history of the Philippines. This was more on religious chronicles, which is also contains what Magellan achieved as the influencer, knowing that they made a history in the Philippines.
So why did Rizal choose Morga over Pigafetta? Its first consideration is that the book was rare. It was so rare that only few libraries that have a copy of it guard it with the same care as a national treasure. Since it was very rare, making Morga for over 2 centuries the only secular general history of the Philippines in print. His second consideration was it was the only civil, compared to the other books only containing religious content during the colonial period. The main complaint against this was that religious historian was dealing more with church history than the Philippines itself and its people. His third consideration was it was more objective and more trustworthy. As well I've said, Morga's was the only civil than those written by the religious missionaries, which were liberally sprinkled by stories of miracles and apparitions. His fourth consideration was it appeared more sympathetic, well at least in some part of the angels, in contrast to the prior accounts, which were many of them were biased or downright racist in tone and in interpretation. His last and fifth consideration is that Morga was not the eyewitness, but also played the major role, since he was a colonial officer way back then, who witnessed and observed the way of living before without any bias.
The importance of Rizal's annotations to Morga was that he tried to use history and historical revisions. It is not just to express his personal views on the historiography, but to create a sense of national consciousness or identity. Since the Spaniards would object, Rizal was aware and prepared that his work will be banned in the Philippines. The first criticism of Rizal's historical work was from Blumentritt. Since Blumentritt is the author for the introduction, he put his observations from Rizal's work in the introduction. Also, Rizal was against by mentioning the word Kiop, since it is the pseudonym of Pablo Fesed, who is a brother of ex-governor Jose Fesed y Templado, which is a journalist that wrote racist and anti-Indio articles. He does not want it to be involved in his works. And some of Rizal's main propositions in his annotations is the people within the communities in the Philippines had a culture on their own, even before the Spanish came. Also, he mentioned how the Filipinos were disseminated, demoralized, exploited by the Spanish colonization. Also, stated that the Philippines was not necessarily superior to its past, since there is still need to improve within the communities of the Philippines.
So Rizal's annotated work of Morga is only considered under his minor writings. It remains largely unread because of the fame of his two novels, Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. So to summarize it all up, for Morga, the Philippines was less before the colonization, but for Rizal, he believed that the Philippines had an established community, way of life and society, and can be successful even without the intervention of the Spaniards.